We are back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Sylvester Inspires Belief Cast. Thank you for joining us. And once again, thanks for believing in me. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Veracity Networks. Thank you for believing in me as well. You guys have been fantastic. I'm grateful to have an amazing person on our podcast today. Her name's Angelique Richards. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I've known her for, what's it been, a couple years now, or has it been a year?
It's been almost a year.
Just over a year. Yeah. And I met her. I met her at Wasatch Recovery, and she's in recovery herself and doing well, doing actually really amazing. And we connected just recently again, and she, agreed to be on this podcast to come share her story with us. And so I want to thank you for being here and being willing to share your story with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
So much.
So why don't we just get started? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and some things about your family?
Yeah. So I grew up in Oregon. I had two siblings.
Okay.
Grew up LDS, born into the Mormon church. And I, at 5 years old, my parents got a divorce. And my mom ended up getting married to a man who was abusive. And we moved around a lot. There was a lot of chaos, and it was a difficult,
tough childhood
time. Yeah. And then.
So was this guy abusive to the whole family, or just to your mom, or?
He was abusive to the whole family.
Okay.
It was physical. It was pretty much all the different forms of abuse there could be. And a lot of it was psychological. There was a lot of weird stuff. He wanted us to change our names and not call our dad, and call him dad, and isolated us from our family. And there was a lot of spiritual abuse in it too, which was difficult.
Would use religion against you and make you feel like if you don't do certain things, you're going to hell kind of stuff?
Yeah,
okay.
There was a lot of that. And then weird stuff like he would, if we didn't do our scripture study, he would be very angry, and he'd throw us out of bed at 3:00 in the morning to do scripture study, and we'd get abused if we said a word wrong. Just really backwards, right?
Yeah.
That's
tough.
Yeah, not how religion should be. So,
yeah.
I didn't feel safe. Didn't feel safe as a child. Didn't feel enough. Didn't feel worthy. I had a very warped belief system around who I was and my worth, and carried that throughout my life. And we ended up getting out of that situation. We ended up actually fleeing in the night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There was a lot of things that happened, and my mom finally had enough and woke up to it and was like, "Okay, I'm not doing this anymore." And she was struggling, obviously, being in that. And that was really healing too.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking?
No.
How old were you when you guys went through this, when you fled through the night? And
I was 9 or 10. I have trouble with timelines, but 9 or 10.
Okay.
And I know he baptized me, and that was something that was hard. But so we left. We had a warden member who took us in, and we were safe. And my mom started over. She worked 3 jobs so she could support herself. We had this tiny little house, but we were safe and we were okay.
Yeah.
She ended up getting remarried, and I was able to kind of have a more normal life. She married someone who wasn't, who was stable. And I remember thinking that I never really belonged, and I never fit in, and that I truly believed that there was something wrong with me. And when I got to high school, I remember thinking, okay, what do I need to do to fit in? Not to belong, which is actually what I wanted. Right. But what do I need to fit in to be okay? And so I remember looking around and thinking, okay, Britney Spears was a big deal. And I was like, okay, she's sexy. She's got a great body. She's blonde. And then I was like, okay, if I can be a cheerleader, if I can date the popular guy and be skinny, I will be lovable. And so I did. And I did. And I was captain of the cheerleading team, dated the quarterback, wore the Letterman's jacket, did all the things. And I still, like, I was safe and I was okay, but I still didn't feel enough.
Right.
And I carried that over into college, and I had a lot of fun. I went to UVSC at the time and had the LDS experience of doing the college out there.
Yeah.
One thing I've worked on actually with you, Todd, is my anger at the church. So I feel like I try not to paint my experience in a negative light.
Well, it's your story, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about where those feelings were at the time and how you feel about it. You're just sharing where you're coming from, and so I know that you've had some issues with that, and that's okay. Yeah. So kind of tell why that turned out to be something you really struggled with.
Yeah. So I got married when I was 20, and I wasn't ready. I didn't really have a strong desire to get married, but I felt like that's what I was supposed to do and what God wanted and what my family wanted, and it would be the right thing, the good thing to do.
Right.
And I feel like getting married at such a young age, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with it. There's a lot that comes with it. And with the way that my mindset was, I was not at all prepared for it. And once I got married and I everything, a lot of things shifted, and it was a lot that, like, I need to be worthy, I need to be enough. And now I'm in this marriage, and I'm taking on a whole new family. And not only any family, a family that is incredible and very stable and perfection to me.
Yeah.
And not only am I a recovering addict, alcoholic, I'm a perfectionist so much. And so I feel like to be okay, I need to be perfect.
Yeah.
And there's no room for imperfection. So I was like, okay, what do I need to do now to hustle and for my worth? So now, I'm not going to be the cheerleader. I'm not going to be the most popular. I need to be the best housewife. So I looked around and I saw my mother.
So what you're saying is if you're perfect, everything will be fine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So you saw your mom.
So my mother-in-law.
Oh,
so
mother-in-law.
The family I'm married into, who is in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, wakes up at 5 a.m. to sew burp cloths for my kids, like makes home meal, just like the ultimate homemaker. And so sweet, so plays the piano, just every little thing that I could think, okay, I need to be like that to be okay.
Yeah.
But that's just not who I am. It's just not. And so I would try to become something I wasn't, and something that didn't really resonate. And I think when we're not true to our authentic self, it's dangerous. It's so dangerous.
Right.
So, and another thing is, for some, like in the Utah culture, I just felt like the women are so beautiful and thin, and I needed to be a good wife. I needed to be skinny. And I had an eating disorder. And then when everything was there was so much pressure, I didn't have to, but I chose to take the edge off. And I started having issues with addiction. And I had an autoimmune disease that was undiagnosed.
Okay.
And didn't know what was happening. And I truly believe that your mental health affects your physical health so much.
Yes. Yeah, they're tied together for sure.
Yep, there is so much disease in the body. And I think when you have trauma at a young age, and when you are constantly just in fight or flight, it affects your body, affects everything.
Yeah. So
I had a ton of physical pain, and I didn't know why. So I found out that, it got to a point where I was bedridden. I was in a wheelchair. I had to quit my job. I just wasn't functioning at all. And then on top of that, I was suicidal. I was just like, what is my value? What's my worth? They thought I had a growth hormone deficiency. And so I got put on all these hormones, and I had gained all this weight. And I felt like image has always been a currency to me. Like the way I look, feeling like it was a big part of my worth, and that's a big part of my validation I would get.
Yeah.
And so after I gained weight, I was like, oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not there's no reason for
Yeah,
me to exist.
Goes back to that belief
Yeah.
that if I'm skinny, I'm okay. If
Yeah.
I'm not, then I'm not okay.
Exactly. And so I was suicidal. I was on tons of medication, and finally it got pretty bad. I started drinking, and I was like going to church. I was still active in the church and
Putting on the show.
putting on the show.
Yeah, putting on the mask. Everything's okay.
Yep. And so but then I would drink, and I would say it was my anxiety medicine, because I'd run out of anxiety medicine. And so I would drink alcohol just to cope. It wasn't even for fun. It was just survival at that point. And I had my dream job. I was working at a record label as a wardrobe stylist. Dream job, and I couldn't get it together. I couldn't function. I was supposed to travel and show up for musicians, and I just couldn't do it. And I also had, my daughter was young. I felt like a huge victim because I found out I couldn't have kids, and so I was so angry at God. I was so angry at my circumstances.
Yeah.
And I finally got to a point where I remember asking a friend for medication, because I was drug seeking, and he was like, here's the thing. He's like, if you need, I will go out on the streets and buy drugs for you, but I think you have a problem. And I was like,
That's kind of weird.
I know. And I think
I'll get the drugs for you, but you have a problem.
But I think what he was saying was, because I was actually asking for marijuana, because it was my way of being like, that's not as bad as getting street drugs. And I think he was saying like the extreme of like, if you need me to do the extreme, I will, but I'll be codependent if you have a problem. Yeah. And my dad struggled with addiction, and I always it was hard. It was really hard to be called an addict, and it honestly to me was the ugliest, worst word I could ever hear. And I was in therapy for so long, just trying to say like, no, like proof, no, I'm not an addict. This is me. So I
you're denying it. Like, no, that's not who I am.
So I was like, I'm gonna prove it. I'm gonna just take my medication as prescribed. And I went like 2 weeks, and everything was empty. And so I was like, okay, I think I do have a problem. So I went to the first rehab, and it was in St. George, and it was called Therapia, and it was an all-girls program, and it was really hard. Yeah. It was really.
How old were you at this time when you went down there?
Oh, I was probably 27. Okay. 28.
Okay.
And it was so difficult, and honestly, I didn't really want it. I didn't really want it like I did the second time around.
Right.
I feel like I also didn't have a higher power, and thought, I'm not even going to try to have I don't. So
you didn't have a connection with God or a higher power at the time, even though you were, putting on the show, like we said, going to church, putting, pretending everything's okay.
Yeah. Oh, I was.
How was your husband through all this up to this point? I mean, he knew you were struggling, obviously, right?
Yeah. He did. And we were so codependent. And he thought like rescuing me was being a good husband, which he was trying so hard to help. And it wasn't good. He's so sweet, so kind, and he just didn't know how to handle it. And then we didn't want to talk to anyone about it, because we didn't want to keep up the facade. We didn't want, which I think people were pretty aware that I had a problem. I would just be, I would be a mess. But he was trying to do anything he could to make sure I was okay.
Right.
And I mean, there were times that I would send him to the liquor store, and even though like he would not, that's completely against his values, he would do it just because he felt like that's what it took to be a good husband.
Right.
And
to support you in your struggle or whatever.
Yeah. And we just both it was like we were sleepwalking. It was like we just didn't know how to cope. Me and Ben are very very similar. I call us a yin and a yang, not a yin and a yang.
Yeah.
But we both struggle with similar things. And so we both would worry about what other people think and keep up this facade and people please and perfectionism and a lot of these things. So we we were kind of a struggle together. But
that's in. I think that codependency, we throw that word. I mean, I think we're all codependent on some level. We depend on other people.
Absolutely.
We do. But there's a healthy way and there's a very unhealthy way about that.
Yeah.
So, and that can, obviously it was getting unhealthy in your relationship, right?
Oh yeah, it was. And it got to the point where it's just, even if when I, after I went to rehab, the codependency was so hard. It was like we were in our roles of me being sick and him being the rescuer. And that was hard in its own.
Well, talk about, you're 27 when you go down there to rehab. You're going to rehab.
Yeah.
Tell me, go back and what were your thoughts as you're checking in? What was going through your mind?
So I remember there was a lot of relief because I got to the point of just my life was so miserable. But then there was also like, how is this my life? How is this happening? But I also was very stubborn and didn't want to change. I wasn't really, I was mad. I felt like everything was happening to me. And I was still in victim mode. And I just was angry. I was angry. I felt angry at God. I felt angry at my family. I felt angry at everything, every situation, anything I could find. I felt like I was the victim and I had a reason. Like I had an excuse to behave the way I did.
Yeah.
And so I didn't recover after rehab. And I struggled, and I had a blessing. So I was told I couldn't have any kids. So after I get out, I had a huge blessing and found out I was misdiagnosed and was able to get pregnant. And that helped.
Wow.
Yeah. So that helped a ton with the drinking and using. And I was able to not do drugs and drink and everything while I was pregnant. I had a C-section and had a healthy baby. C-section, went on some pain pills for a while, went off. And then slowly was like, I have insomnia now. I need medication for that. And now I have some anxiety. I need some medication for that. And slowly things started to go back to how they were.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And I think that happens a lot where it can creep in like that. 'Cause like, hey, I'm struggling here. I need something to help me there. And, we turn to pills sometimes, or a lot of the times. I think it's very common where people get caught up in that, and that's the tough part, because you weren't maybe necessarily trying to drug seek, but that's unfortunately where it starts leading to, and then it kind of opens up the door to everything else again, right?
Yep. Yeah. So after I had my baby, I was doing better, but then still I started to leave the church and started feeling like having a crisis of faith and feeling like this is not the life I wanted. I got put into this situation where I was born into the church, and then I had all these rules and restrictions and all of these things put on me. I was oppressed and suppressed, and I felt like I had to live this life that it didn't resonate. And I started thinking like, I want to live, I want to be free. I want to do what I want. I want to eat, drink, and be married. I want to live. Yeah. And so, I started having my faith crisis, and, me and Ben started having problems in our marriage, and we wanted different things, and it was a strain on our marriage. And I was just like, hey, this isn't the life I want.
Yeah.
It's not. And I loved our family, but I just didn't feel happy and healthy and thriving. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so, I was still obviously in addiction brain, and I started drinking again. Okay. So once I started drinking, it went downhill fast. And so then I started drinking and wanted to experience life. And we separated, and I started partying a lot. And then I felt sad that I knew I was causing him and my kids pain, and I think my inner being knew it wasn't who I am, but it was what I wanted. And I the pendulum swung so far the other way. It was like I was this really society mom, housewife, doing all these things. And now I'm going to go to party girl. And so I started going to bars and drinking and taking party drugs. And I was wild. I went pretty wild. And this continued for longer than I'm happy about. It continued for a while. And it got to the point where I was just like, what in the hell has happened to my life?
Mm-hmm.
And I've just felt like, who am I anymore? Like what is me, and what is me trying to project that I'm not this good Mormon girl? And what is, like, it just was like, I have no idea who I am. I don't know if I am my image. I don't know if I am my sexuality. I don't know if I am this party girl or a housewife, or what am I? I have no idea. And it was always changing. I think throughout my life, I was always redefining who I was.
Yeah.
That I was like, who am I?
You know, when you say this too, one of the best definitions I've heard about what depression really is we're trying to be someone we're not.
Yeah.
And so I hear that in your story where you're trying to fit in over here. That doesn't feel right. I'm not fitting in over here. Who am I here? Who am I there?
Yeah.
And you're trying to fit in all these different areas, and you're still left empty.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And absolutely. The depression thing with not being who you are is exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a huge manifester. And I remember I would just I sometimes would lay in bed and just dream of the life I wanted. And I was laying in bed, and I have big dreams. You know this.
Oh yeah, yes you do.
And I was I love Macklemore so much.
Yeah.
And I'm envisioning being friends with him. And,
sure.
And all this stuff. And all of a sudden, I get hit with. And at this point, I have no God, no spirit, nothing. There's no spirituality in my life. And I'm high and drunk, and I'm in bed just thinking, manifesting, and I get hit with this. The most intense spiritual experience I've ever had. And it was like I was held and frozen. And it was the clearest message. And it was, you can have whatever you want in this life. But if you keep drinking and doing drugs, you will die.
Because you can have that too if you want.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just was like, oh my gosh, wow. And so I finally was like, okay, I'm done. And I called a friend, and I was like, I need to go into detox. And I was on a lot of pills. And I mean, during this time too, there's times I wouldn't wake up, and I would there's a lot of damage that was done. Right. And I didn't know that I would, and even before that, I would try to stop on my own. And I was miserable. And from the outside, if you looked at my Instagram, you would think I was the happiest, most I was just doing great. And I just put on this facade of everything's amazing in life.
Yeah.
And so I made some calls, and I went into detox. And I was ready. I was like, hey, I don't want this life anymore. I wanted to experience life, and there was things that I wanted to experience. I remember I had a list of things I wanted to experience. Like I want to have a one-night stand with like a cute guy in a hotel room. And there was things that happened that I'm just like, that is so empty. And things that seem sexy and fun and exciting. It was just completely empty, and feeling like that the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Right.
And so I went into detox, and it was so hard. It was so hard. Oh my gosh. And I didn't want to do an inpatient program. I was like, I'm not doing an inpatient program. My addiction's not that bad. I'm okay. And I had a guy who was in the detox area with me, and he was like, you need to go to Wasatch. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, nope, you need to go. It's for you.
Right.
I was like, well, I'm going to do outpatient. He's like, nope, you need to go. Inpatient, you need to do it. Yeah. It's the best one. And then I had Ryan.
Yeah, Decker.
Decker, yes.
Good old Decker.
Oh, he's so good. Talked to him, and then I had a woman come in. I can't think of her name, but she, my insurance wasn't covered with her, and she was like, go to Wasatch. So everything was pointing to Wasatch. And I came in, and oh my gosh, I wanted to leave at first so bad, and I tried a couple times.
Yes, you did.
I was like, this is bullshit. I'm out of here. I'm not doing this. This isn't for me. I'm better than this.
Yeah, because it's a tough program, and we hit you hard when you first come in. And, and Wendy was your therapist, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and she's tough.
So tough. And I remember, oh my gosh, yes. I just was like, I've never been treated like this in my life. Because you guys don't coddle. You don't try to make it comfortable. It's very uncomfortable. Yeah. But it was the most transformational month of my entire life.
Yeah.
And I remember I was going to pack my bags. Jake came in and was like, you know, what's going on? And I was like, this is bullshit. You guys do processing for 2 hours a day? I'm like, absolutely not. That's not for me. I'm not going to do this. I don't need that. I don't want to hear about other people's problems.
Yeah.
And then I remember walking upstairs to pack my bags, and something hit me again. And it was like, you are not just here for you. And I was like, okay. And then I sat in my room and processed. I'm like, okay, I'll stay one more day. And then the next day I saw a girl who I was in recovery with 5 years before get her 5-year chip.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, and look at her life. Like her life, it was the most, I was like, I can do this. I want that. I want that. It was the most amazing share. And she just talked about how it was incredible. She's like, I can't believe this is my life. And she looked like a different person.
Yeah.
She was happy. She was in a healthy relationship. She's a yoga instructor. And I was just like, if she can do that, if I can see where she was and she's here now, I can do it too. And,
nice.
And so there's just so many like amazing things that happen like that, throughout the program. And I learned so many amazing principles and had so many candid conversations and was so called out, where I know people love me in my life, but I feel like the people who really absolutely love you can call you out.
Yeah, they'll tell you the truth.
Yes.
And that's really what we do here, is we just tell you the truth.
And it's painful.
One of the things we'll say, hey, do you want us to be honest or do you want us to be nice?
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, yeah, let's be honest. But honest doesn't always feel nice.
Yeah.
But that's where we get right to it, you know, and Wendy's one of the best at it. And, you know, you and I met a lot too. Yep. And, you know, we had some really powerful sessions where you had these aha moments. I remember when I first met you, kind of that same thing. I could tell you didn't want to be here. You want to leave, you know, but then, you know, you had this shift and you started working hard. You were, you know, doing everything I was asking you to do and what Wendy was asking you to do. And you really started to thrive. We saw that.
Yeah.
You know,
it was honestly the hardest transformation. I remember, so during the callouts, I would be just panicked the whole time. Okay, what are they going to say? They're going to notice that, you know, because I have this perfectionist thing going. So I would role play in my head being called out and then my rebuttal. Yeah. And I got like 2 hours of sleep a night. Right. And I was like, okay, I can't do this. I need to just surrender and let this happen. And it was so cool because I had a lot of really spiritual experience here and started developing my spirituality here. And I remember I realized I was such a victim to the Mormon church, and I was so angry. And you called me out and you're like, resentment leads to rebellion. And you resenting the church, what has it done to the church? And I'm like, nothing. And you're like, what has it done to you? I'm like, I blew up my life. Yeah. And you're like, if you want to get better, if you want this life, you need to clear that up. You need to forgive and be okay with your past. And I think that a big thing for me was realizing that things aren't happening to me, they're happening for me. Yeah. And realizing that the reason that I have learned so much through my experience, and that I am who I am because of it. And at the time, I didn't really like who I was. And so that was a hard part. But now, looking at where I am, I'm so grateful for everything that's happened, and realizing that it's all part of the process. It all is. It's not like, well, that was a failure and now I'm a failure. No, it's all learning and growing, and it's okay. And I this program was pretty incredible. I'm seriously so grateful for it. You guys do amazing work, seriously.
Well, it's funny. We can have people come through this program and they hate it.
Okay.
And we have people who love it. And it really comes down to the individual. I always say this, you can go to the worst treatment center on the planet. And if you really want it, you'll get it.
Oh, yeah.
You can go to the best, which I think this place is,
Yeah.
Wasatch Recovery. I think it's the best. You can come here, and if you don't want it, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get it. But what we saw in the beginning, you didn't want it.
No.
But then that, like you said, that shift happened, and it may have been gradual, but things were happening. But we started to see, no, she really wants this.
Yeah.
And whenever we see a client wanting it, that's when the magic happens.
Oh,
that's when things start to click, and the motivation kicks in, the desire, the drive, willing to be uncomfortable, and again, we saw that transformation with you. It was really cool.
Well, I think that the cool thing about Callouts, which I was so opposed to in the beginning, is that it's this opportunity for you to just be like, oh, I'm really imperfect and I have made mistakes, but I am still lovable and amazing and powerful and okay.
Yeah.
And it's hard to sometimes see that in you, but when you look at other people sharing and you just have so much empathy and compassion and love for that person, and seeing their experience and thinking that doesn't change the person you are and how amazing you are. That's something you went through, but that doesn't change your worth or your value.
Yeah, I love that.
I remember going, oh my gosh, there was some call outs in that I remember thinking like things that I struggled with. I know one of the therapists said something like to a client. He's like, "You're fat." And I was like, "What did you just say?" He's like, "You're fat. What does that mean? What does that mean about you?" And I was so upset about it, but thinking about it, like, somebody's weight doesn't change their value.
Right. Yeah.
And that seemed like a very intense way to say it, but it's true. Like, I love that the view of themselves doesn't change how incredible they are.
Right.
And so it's so cool having all these mirrors around you of reflections of, oh my gosh, that's me. I've experienced that. And I struggle with that. And so you don't have time to just focus on yourself the whole time. I probably got 4 hours of processing, but I learned so much.
Oh, for sure.
In the sessions that it was.
Well, even when you're not actually on the hot seat in process, you're processing. So you had hours and hours and hours and hours of processing. And that's why group therapy is so powerful, because when someone's going through something, you can relate. You're like, man, I know what she's going through or he went through. And I can relate because I've been there too. Yeah. So, that's powerful.
Yeah, it was really amazing.
So how are you doing now? How's life going? Let's talk about that for a minute. Like, obviously you've been clean for a while now. But, I mean, you got some exciting things coming up. Just talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Okay,
so once I got out of treatment, I was really careful about the company I kept. So I shrunk my group, and I just kept safe people around until I felt really, really solid. Mm-hmm. And I was told, don't date, no relationships, and that was honestly maybe harder than the drugs and alcohol.
For sure.
Because I got a lot of validation out of that. But I remember Wendy said something to me in therapy, and she was like, you need to take some time to yourself, like a year to yourself. She said, I promise you it will be the greatest gift you've ever given yourself. Mm-hmm. So that just kept coming to me, that message. And so I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this, and it's going to be transformative and hard, but it's going to be amazing. So I just focused on being a mom. I got new hobbies. I love yoga, so into yoga. I'm also the thrift queen. I love thrift shopping.
Sure.
And so I got into, I started researching more about fashion and styling, and just got excited about my passions. I created more relationships that mattered. So the coolest thing that has happened is I used to have so much resentment towards my mom about, you got a divorce and you ended up marrying a guy who was abusive and this happened. And I had so much resentment. Like, how could you do that? And realizing that I realized it here is she did the best she knew how. And she could. And I was able to look at her with compassion and love and realizing that I too I was in pain and I was doing the best I could.
You're doing the best you
I
could.
was not being the greatest mom, and my kids could totally look at me and think, what in the hell was she doing?
Yeah.
What was she doing? And that was a huge aha moment for me to think, okay, I need to have compassion that I would want from my children because I'm a human. Being a mom doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. It doesn't magically mean you're going to just make all the right choices. You're human. So I developed the coolest relationship with my mom. We are
awesome.
like I went from like hardly talking to her to like just being angry at her to we talk almost every day. We actually have thought about doing a podcast together. But just like the coolest relationship.
Yeah.
And then with family and my kids, I was asleep with my kids before, and now we have conversations and we connect and we do fun things, and even quarantine has been the coolest opportunity.
Well, real quick, speaking of the connection you have with your kids, which is amazing, I challenged you to do something when you were here in treatment, and I do this thing. We do family night once a week at Wasatch Recovery where we invite the families, and I was in charge of family night this particular time, and I challenged you and asked you to write a letter about what greatness is, and as if you were writing it to your own kids.
Yeah.
And so Angelique wrote this amazing letter, and she invited Ben and her 2 kids to come listen to this letter, and she shared it in front of the entire group, not just all the residents, but all their families. Place was packed, and that letter was unbelievable. And to see the expressions of your children on their faces was amazing. Talk a little bit about that and how that was empowering for you.
That was a big turning point for me. I actually was going to bring it and share it, but it's okay.
That's okay. We'll let that slide.
Yes. So, I really thought about what greatness was, and what I would want my kids to know. And a big part of it was that greatness is about being okay with being imperfect. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's not winning first place. It's showing up. Yeah. It's not being the most popular. It's being the most loving. It's not being perfect. It's being okay with your imperfections. And while being up in front of them and all these people and just staring at my daughter, she had so much pride on her face. And she was just like in awe. Like it was like I was a celebrity. I was a rock star to her.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that was a point. I remember after that, and so many people came up and were touched by it, and I realized like I could be an example, and I could be I could show people that I want to empower people to be okay with who they are, to love themselves, and to realize that this is what I say is, if you are in addiction, you're on the path to a hero's journey. This is your beginning.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that's your future, or this is the way you need to live. It just means you're on the path, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And honestly, the blessings of my addiction has been amazing.
Yes.
It's been incredible. It's like I get to wake up and feel amazing and think, okay, I'm not hungover. I'm not needing to rely on drugs or alcohol to be okay. I have tools. I can process. I can communicate. It's just like I'm so grateful at who I am and the things I've learned.
Well, you also don't wake up with this mental load on top of you and this emotional toll because you've resolved these resentments.
Yeah. Yes.
And so you don't wake up with this heaviness as well.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely. I think there's I'm a huge Abraham Hicks fan. She says, and this kind of goes along with the depression thing, is that anxiety is being so separated from who your inner being, who you really are.
Right.
And it feels so uncomfortable because you're not in alignment with who you actually are. And so I just lived, and I think that was so true, is that I knew who I wanted to be and who I actually am, what my soul is.
Sure.
But I was so far away from it. And I think also having, and belief systems are a thought that you keep thinking, right?
Yeah.
And so with the belief systems I had, I was always anxious. I was always depressed. Everything was happening to me. And I think the shift of saying, of changing my belief systems has been incredible.
Yeah.
It's such a better way to live. It's not that hard either.
Yeah.
Does that
Well, no. I mean, I think we overcomplicate it.
Yes.
You know?
That's
I mean, it definitely takes work,
absolutely.
But it's not like this gigantic solution, so to speak. It's like, if I just start shifting my energy in this direction, look what can happen. It's pretty amazing.
Yep, it is.
I'm going to have you read something. Read that out loud, and then tell me what you feel about that.
Okay. I remember it's the first time. The most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize that there is nothing wrong with you. I remember when I first came into your office and we sat down and you're like, and I was crying, I was in tears, and you're like, "Kay, read that." And I think I tried to convince you that was wrong.
Yeah.
I was like, "No, Todd, but this, and this." And honestly, it's amazing. It's so true that realize that we are imperfect people and we struggle, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. Yeah. And I think I was so quick to believe that there was something intrinsically wrong with me.
Right.
That I wasn't lovable. I wasn't enough. I wasn't worthy. And I had to do all this stuff to make up for it. Yeah. And through this process, I had a lot of aha moments, but it was very gradual too, realizing that I'm an actually very incredible person.
Yeah.
And there is nothing wrong with me. And we put these labels on ourselves. And, there's diagnosis, there's labels, in this world, we're constantly faced with identifying as something, judging ourselves. And honestly, I feel like realizing that there's nothing wrong with me has been so empowering and so beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I remember that moment. And, it's funny because people will try to convince, no, there is something wrong, man. Trust me. And it's not that we're saying that statement doesn't mean that we don't have issues or problems that we need to work on. Yeah. What it means inherently, your value is at 100, and it always has been, and it always will be. I think I remember telling you that I told you, quit looking for the diamond necklace that's already around your neck.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You're digging in the couch cushions. You're like yelling to everybody, "Where's my diamond necklace?" Yeah. And I was like, "It's already around your neck."
Yes,
and you're like, "Oh, there it is." Mm-hmm. And it's always been there, and it always will be.
Yeah.
Even when you make a mistake, your value doesn't change.
That is a huge, would you call that a principle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which I was like, "Okay, church principles done. I don't have anything. I'm just a blank slate. I'm just going to do what I want." So I started building more principles and beliefs and stuff. And that was something that was a huge aha moment for me. And thinking like, I have everything I need. It's all within me. Yeah. It's just realizing it. And I don't have to try to be good. I am good. Yeah. There's nothing I have to do to be good or look good it's just within. It's already there.
And again, then you're now being who you really are.
Yes.
Which eliminates that anxiety, that depression. Remember trying to be someone we're not.
Yes.
No, I know who I am.
Yeah.
Inherently, I'm a good person. I am love. I'm light. I'm energy. When we know that and we live in that, it's amazing how we feel. Yeah. And I see that in your countenance, like, a year ago when I saw you compared to now, it's like, wow. It's amazing to see just the glow and the energy of you. And so, and I know you got some exciting things coming up.
Yeah.
I know we can't give the details about it, but you manifested that as well. You put some things out there, and you're going to be doing something really cool coming up.
Yes.
That eventually everyone will know about.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
And I know it's like, I wish we could say it, but we can't. She had to sign an NDA, and but some cool stuff.
Some exciting stuff to come. Yeah. Yes, and it's so cool that, like, I think the belief that you can do whatever you want and that I am powerful beyond measure. Hey,
Boom.
hey,
Yeah.
it's on. That it's just like I am in it, and I think that having passion about something has been huge in my recovery.
Right.
Because I was very passionate about addiction and the lifestyle I had, so I had room for passion. I had some room. And I was like, hey, what am I going to fill this time and energy with? And I'm like, I am going to go for my dreams and I'm going to talk about it. And I think I remember, so I have a dream to have my own reality show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a thrifter. I have an Instagram called Thrift Store Stylist, and I was a wardrobe stylist, turned it into thrifting. And I have all these dreams. And so I started talking about it. I started visualizing it. I started putting it out there. I've had things just kind of moving into place and happening. Right. And it's just so exciting.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
I can do anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I got this.
No, you're amazing. And I'm so happy for you to see how good you're doing. And you've put in the work, and you listen to the principles you've learned here at Wasatch, and you've embraced them, and you've incorporated them into your life. And that's why you're doing well. Again, you're doing the work, and that's the beauty of it. If someone's listening to this podcast right now and they're struggling and they're just having a rough time, what's some advice maybe you could give them right now? I know it's a big question, but I'm sure there's someone right now who's listening to this that needs maybe. Obviously, your whole podcast is amazing advice, but if someone's having a rough time, what could you tell them?
You are never too far gone. You're never, it's not hopeless. And it feels like that. And when you're that low, I understand when it just feels like I'm done.
Right.
I can't anymore. And I think that you've never gone too far to come back. And that when you are in that place of that much pain, and I think it's easy to have judgments on yourself and beliefs that you are not worthy and you're not lovable and you're not enough and you shouldn't even live. And I've been there. I've so been there, and it is a lie. And you have so much value. And I would say that you it's hard and it's difficult, but I promise it is not nearly as hard as the pain you feel right now. And if you can commit to changing your life, which you 100% absolutely can, you will be in shock at what your life looks like.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't believe my life right now. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
I'm in shock. And even if things weren't going so well, the way I feel every day just being in my skin is I can't even think of words. It's incredible, isn't it? Even enough.
Sure.
And I would just say don't give up hope. Reach out, and you can get through it. It's possible.
Very well said. That was beautifully said.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great advice. And I felt that. And I know people hearing this will feel that as well. If someone wanted to ask you a question who's listening to this, or if they wanted to reach out to you or even follow you, what would be the best way for them to do that? Can you share that with us?
Yes. So on Instagram, it's thrift_store_stylist, thrift store stylist. Slide into the DMs. That's what the cool kids say, right?
I guess.
I think it is.
I don't know. I'm not cool. I'm just like, DM me.
On Facebook, Angelique Richards. And I think that's the best way.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. So, if anyone has a question, please reach out to Angelique and ask her a question. Yeah. She's an open book.
I am a total open book.
Yeah.
And if you ever need support, I'm here too.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah, and I know that's part of what you want to do moving forward is help other people in a really profound way. And hopefully this, you sharing your story on our Belief Cast today, that it will help kind of springboard you in that direction, because you do have an amazing story. You're a light to this world. You're a light to me, to everyone here at Wasatch. We love you, and we're so grateful to see how well you're doing. And that you just listened to what was said, and now you're doing the work. So we're really excited for you.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful to know you, and thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you. That
You
was
bet.
so fun.
Yeah, so there you go, folks. Another amazing story from another amazing person. And I love what she said. Just remember, your value never fluctuates. It's always the same. You're amazing, all of you. And if you know anyone who might be struggling with their self-worth, please share this belief cast with them because they need to hear Angelique's story. So thanks again for believing in me and for all your support. And until next time.